Welcome to the CEO Corner. Rishabh Alpani here, and I interview successful entrepreneurs to share their experiences, knowledge, and wisdom on different aspects of business based on their entrepreneurial endeavors. In the CEO Corner today, I will be going over the journey of a leading global college consulting company, the Red Pen. I brought in Ms. Kimberly Dixit, who is the co-founder and CEO of the Red Pen, to share information on the steps she took to first get the company out in the market, the problems she faced and the way she solved them, the key steps that helped the company grow, advice for anyone to establish a successful business, and more. To start off, could you please introduce the Red Pen in some more detail and what your mission as a company is?
Hi, yes. Thank you, Rishabh. It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me. So the Red Pen is an independent education consultancy that supports students at every stage of the education ladder. So we help students and their families make decisions and understand education, whether it's, boarding school, college, postgrad, MBA, PhD. We do it all. So that's what we do. And the mission is really to kind of provide, access to educational opportunities across the world and across all sort of types of educational opportunities.
That's great. So I was reading a little bit about the Red Pen before too, and I learned that it's female empowered. So could you please just elaborate a little bit more about this and tell us your motivation behind this?
Yeah, so motivation is honestly more a circumstance. The co-founders and the partners and all the senior leadership are all women. It's just kind of worked out that way over the years. And similarly, most of our staff and employees and counselors are also women. We do have some men in different positions, but for by and large, the company is owned, operated, and mostly run by women. I think, one of the main reasons that I think that is how things worked out is because from the start, as employers, we've always offered people a lot of flexibility, and that's something that we really feel is an important part of our culture. And I think a lot of women, whether they're returning back to work after a break or whether they have other responsibilities in the home or in other professional roles, this is a good way to, do something different that I think a lot of people want to do, but they can't do it full time. And I think women needing that flexibility is something that we've always offered. And so it's sort of been really an attractive career path for a lot of women.
That's really interesting. What was the moment when you first came across the thought of launching this business?
So it's interesting. We had my co-founder and she and I were both living in India, which is earlier, like maybe 15 years ago, so maybe more like 18 years ago. And both of us had been educated in the US at different levels in different kinds of institutions. And we were just getting approached for advice and guidance informally. And, we always offered, we always were happy to give our advice to people, but it was really just our opinions and advice based on our own experience. But one student in particular that we just had a lot of success with this informal advising, and then decided to sort of formalize things. I think one of the things that really kind of sealed it was we had a neighbor who was a 12th grade student, and he went to the same school as my children, and my children were really little. They were in like KG level or something, and he was in the grade 12 and he was applying for college. And I was just talking to him one day at the bus stop and asking him, what are you doing and where are you applying to college and things like that. And he was talking to me about it, and he was applying to Stanford. And I had been a postdoctoral teaching fellow at Stanford. So I was quite familiar with, the freshman program and what Stanford students are like and what Stanford might be looking for. And so I said, I'm happy to read your essays. And so I read them. And I gave him a lot of advice, and he, we helped him shape them up. And then he eventually got into Stanford. So that was a great success story. And it was really he who said, no one is doing this the way you guys are doing it. Nobody has sort of the insights and experience that you all have, and is giving the advice in a way that's very, personalized and based on, what each student is doing and what the application should look like from a particular student and things like that. So he just really liked our approach. He encouraged us, and we're like, okay, let's give it a try. So that was really kind of the impetus behind, starting the company.
When you were first starting out, what were the first few steps you took to get your service out in the market?
So we did a lot of things to get into the market. I mean, I remember hosting workshops, trying to connect with schools, and putting the information out in our networks. And, I think there was just a lot of trial and error there. And what worked in the beginning may not work now, and vice versa. What didn't work in the beginning, now that we have a brand and a presence, may be working much better for us now. So the early days were just a lot of, kind of, like I said, getting organically getting in front of, getting people aware of what we're doing, and having them sort of put it out in their own networks and things. So it was very, very on the ground, grassroots kind of startup.
Looking back as you were first starting out, what were some of the problems and difficulties you had?
I would say that, there was nothing very serious that was a challenge, but it was really challenging just to get established in the market, and to realize when we were wasting our time and then just move on to something else. Because I think the market was quite young then, and not very many people were doing what we were doing. And so, we were trying everything. So I think that was the biggest challenge, was just kind of like, feeling like, your attention is a little bit divided in terms of how to grow. When it came to, our core services, that was really simple, because we knew that what we had to do was, help people apply to education programs, and that was simple. But to grow that, we did a lot of trial and error, and I think some of that probably wasted our time, or but we learned from it all, right? You learned that that's not the right direction to go in for your product or things like that. So I think if anything was challenging, it was probably that, just trying to get established in the market, figuring out what growth, what would lead to growth and things like that. Because there's a lot of people in India, and there are a lot of people who want education, but just really narrowing down on, who are the people that we can really service, and that really will matter to our growth, was kind of a challenge.
After this initial phase of launching the business and overcoming these challenges, what were the prominent actions you took to make more sales and grow your company to where it is right now?
I think the main thing that we did was, building a team. So like I said, because we're purely a services business, and all of the service that we deliver is based on knowledge, we had to, hire people, train them, transfer the knowledge, and sort of, nurture their style according to our culture, and make sure that they were sort of consistently delivering the quality of service that we insisted on, I guess. But we also introduced more revenue streams. Like in the beginning, we were only helping people with undergraduate and MBA applications, but then we introduced postgrad and boarding school, and we introduced events. And then the other thing I think that we did that really helped us grow was capitalizing on relationships that we built through different networks and professional development. And I think that, you can only do that when you actually have a brand and people know who you are. So, that's been something that we've been aware of as a very valuable asset that we have to, like I said, capitalize on and make the most of. So we now do, we do some kind of we have developed some kind of relationships with other institutions. So that's moved things a little bit from B2C to B2B, but not much.
What are some of the Red Pen's unique selling points that allows you to compete in the market?
Um, I would say the main thing that are our unique selling points are our culture, and that is a selling point both from an employer point of view as well as a provider to our service to our customers. So building the culture the way that we have, and insisting on quality and integrity and being a very open kind of culture in terms of employees having access to leadership and being close, all of us being very close to the process of the work that we do. I think that's something that really makes us stand out. And I think I've seen a lot of other companies do it in different ways, but for us, that the way that we do it, I think is it works really well for us. I don't know that we would be as strong, have as strong of a brand as we do if we had kind of just as leaders just held on to the brand, meaning that the brand is me or the brand is my partner. Do you know what I mean? So building the brand around our whole team, I think has been a really valuable aspect of what we do. Like I said, both in terms of employee retention as well as, customer acquisition.
For the customer acquisition part, how did you convey your culture to the consumers to try to make more sales?
So, I mean, again, I think that's something that it isn't easy to convey your company culture a to a customer, but I think also there's a little bit of educating a customer around that, right? They don't really know what it is that they're getting from you versus a competitor, where the competitor may be, very fixated on a certain outcome, but you need to help them understand that, it's a lot about the process. It's a lot about the relationships. And we really, see that and we nurture that and things like that. So it's a lot of, educating the consumer themselves on what it is that they actually need. So, and that I think conveys the culture that we kind of care about, the outcome as much as you do, but we want to get there in the right way. So that kind of integrity piece comes when you're explaining to somebody, your service, how it works, and what you're doing, etc.
So, as you were growing up to where you are right now, what are some big mistakes that you made throughout this journey that taught you some valuable lessons?
Um, I don't think that there's any like, oh my God, that was such a mistake and it was costly. Like we experimented a lot, but I don't think there was anything where it was just like really, really risky and it didn't work out. But I think there were definitely opportunities that came our way in the beginning, and we could have, capitalized on those opportunities to say partner with people in different geographic regions and things like that. And we didn't. And maybe if we'd done that, we would have maybe grown faster or had a better, had a different, sort of, we would have maybe, become a global company sooner or something like that. So those are the kinds of things that I think, maybe we would have done differently, but, we did, but then at the same time, right before COVID, we did, kind of partner with some people in, Kenya in Nairobi to start a Red Pen over there. And I think, it just didn't work out. And a lot of, we don't talk about it a lot because a lot of the reason why it didn't work out is because of COVID. COVID just happened. And then suddenly that whole partnership was over. But at the same time, I think there was a lot that wasn't, we didn't know the market well enough, and neither did the person who wanted to partner with us, because you get into these situations where you have a brand and people see that it's not there in their market and they want to be a part of it and bringing it to their market, but they neither know your brand nor necessarily know their market as well. So we've learned from that, and then we've adjusted our partnership kind of outlook and outreach in different ways, I think, rather than sort of taking things on board and in-house as readily.
Lastly, based on your experiences, could you please share some meaningful advice or wisdom aside from what's been discussed so far that would have helped you if you were just starting out a business? Like, I know you talked about maybe taking up some partnerships with other companies, but something more into like the wisdom side of it, any motivation, words of motivation?
I mean, I think the main, and this is very very, personality based. But for me, I really value having partners. So I think if anyone were coming to me and they were like, I want to do a startup and I want to, get started on some entrepreneurial journey, I would probably encourage them to have a partner. I think most people try to avoid partnerships because either they want sole control over a situation, or, a business. But for me personally, that would have not worked. So I think that's been kind of one of my main learnings about myself and also about doing business. And for me is that, having a good partner who you trust and who complements your strengths with different strengths is very, very important. And like I said, if not for my partners through this journey, we would not be where we are. I mean, I think the partnership has really taken us all the way. And if you can, find someone who is like-minded and you can see, understand how your future is going to go together. Or if there's not that much risk involved of getting a partnership, then I would really say that's a great idea. Of course, you have to share everything 50-50, but it's worth it.
Great. That's all for today. Thank you so much, Ms. Kimberly, for being here and sharing your experiences. To all the listeners, I post frequently, so stay in the loop to learn new things that develop your business understanding. And for now, the CEO Corner is closed.